Hey, welcome back to your Dream Coach podcast. I'm Shayla Wey, and I want to open up today with something that I think most leaders experience but rarely name out loud. The person on your team who is nothing like you. And you know exactly who I mean. The one whose working style is the total opposite of yours, who communicates differently, processes differently, motivates differently, who, if you are being honest, you sometimes find genuinely hard to lead. Not because they are bad at their job, but because the way they show up in the work is so different from how you show up that the gap between you sometimes feels like a language barrier. Well, most leaders, when they hit that gap, interpret it as a problem, a mismatch, evidence that the hire was not quite right, or that the culture fit is off, or that leadership would be so much easier if everyone just worked the way you were. Well, I want to offer you a completely different frame today. The people on your team who are nothing like you are not obstacles to the dream. They are requirements of it, because the dream you are building is bigger than any single way of thinking, bigger than your perspective alone, bigger than what one leadership style, one communication approach, one way of processing the world can produce. The team that builds something extraordinary is almost never a team that all thinks the same way. It's a team that thinks differently and is led by someone who knows how to bring that difference into alignment. And that is what today's episode is all about. The dream needs people who are not you. And so let's start with the dream. Whatever you wrote down in maybe episode 156, or maybe something you sat with during episode 162, I think that was the dream audit episode, the vision you are building toward, it requires capabilities that you do not have. And that is not a criticism. That is just the nature of a dream that is genuinely bigger than you. The founder who is a visionary and a big picture thinker needs the person on the team who is detail oriented and execution focused. The leader who moves fast and makes decisions intuitively needs the team member who slows down and asks the questions that reveal what was missed. The entrepreneur who is energized by relationships and connection needs the operator who is energized by systems and structure. And every one of those needs is a different kind of person, a different working style, a different set of natural strengths. And if you only hire people who think and work the way you do, you build a team that is very good at the things you are good at and very weak at everything else. The dream does not need a team of you. It needs a team that together covers the ground that you cannot cover alone. But here is what makes this hard. The people who fill your gaps are almost by definition people who are different from you. And difference in a team context creates friction. It creates misunderstanding. It creates moments where someone's working style feels like a problem rather than an asset. And your job as the leader is not to eliminate that friction. It's to understand it well enough to use it productively, to lead across the differences in a way that brings the whole team toward the dream without requiring everyone to become a version of you. The dream does not need a team of you. It needs a team that together sees what you cannot see alone. And so why does that difference feel hard when it comes to leading and to leadership? Well, before we get into how to lead across the difference, I want to spend some time on why it can feel hard, because understanding the source of the friction changes how you work with it. And what happens is that we can often default to our own experience as the standard. And every leader has a natural bias toward their own working style, and not maliciously, just instinctively. We know what works for us. We know how we process information, how we prefer to communicate, how we like to be managed and recognized and developed. And we tend to assume, without meaning to, that what works for us is roughly what should work for everybody. So when someone on the team does not respond to feedback the way we expect, or needs more detail than we naturally provide, or communicates in a style that feels indirect or abrupt or overly cautious or even too impulsive, we interpret that as a problem with them rather than a difference between us. And so the reframe is to hold your own working style as one style among rather than as the standard that others are deviating from. And so that shift alone changes everything about how you see the people on your team who are nothing like you. And so sometimes we can confuse different with difficult. Now, this is one I see in most high performing and high standard leaders, is that they have a clear picture of what excellent looks like. And when someone is doing excellent work in a way that does not match that picture, it reads as difficult rather than different. The detail-oriented team member who needs more context than you gave them is not being difficult. They are being thorough. The big picture thinker who skips the process and jumps to the outcome is not being reckless. They're being efficient. And the quiet team member who does not contribute much in meetings but delivers exceptional work independently is not being disengaged. They're being introverted. And so difficult is a values problem. Different is a style problem. And the solutions are completely different. And so we lead from our strengths instead of their needs. And so the most natural, most limiting leadership pattern is to lead others the way you would want to be led, to coach from your own motivators, to communicate in the style that works best for you, to provide feedback in the format that would have helped you most. But your team is not you. And the most effective leadership is not about what works for the leader. It's about what works for the person being led. And that requires a genuine curiosity about how each person on your team is different, what they need to do their work best, how you can adjust your approach to meet them, rather than always expecting them to meet you. So I've found that there's 4 types of difference that matters the most. And so there are many ways that people differ in a team context, but in my experience coaching founders and developing managers, 4 types of difference show up most consistently as leadership challenges. And each one has a specific approach that works. Difference number 1 is the pace difference. Some people on your team are wired to move fast. They make decisions quickly, start before the plan is complete, and are energized by momentum. Others are wired to move deliberately. They need time to think. They want the full picture before they start and are energized by getting it right rather than getting it done. The fast-moving leader often reads the deliberate team member as slow, uncommitted, or resistant to change. The deliberate team member often reads the fast-moving leader as reckless or not thinking things through. How to lead across this difference. Give fast movers latitude and milestones, not micromanagement. And then give deliberate movers context and time, not urgency and pressure. And recognize that both styles produce excellent results and that the combination of both on the same team catches more than just either one of those alone. Difference number 2 is the communication difference. Some people communicate directly. They say exactly what they mean, prefer keeping things really brief, and are uncomfortable with ambiguity. Others communicate contextually. They give background before conclusions, prefer to explore before deciding, and are uncomfortable when something feels rushed to resolution. Direct communicators experience contextual communicators as indirect or evasive, and contextual communicators experience direct communicators as blunt or dismissive. How to lead across this difference is name it explicitly. Tell your team that you value both styles and that neither is wrong. Create meeting structures that honor both, and like giving time for reflection before expecting them to contribute something. And when you're giving feedback to someone whose communication style is different from yours, adjust your delivery to their reception, not your preference. Difference number 3 is the motivation difference. Some people are primarily motivated by achievement, hitting targets, external recognition, visible progress. Others are primarily motivated by contribution, knowing their work matters, being part of something bigger, feeling genuinely valued as a person rather than a performer. Leaders who are achievement motivated often underinvest in the contribution conversation. They recognize results without connecting results to meaning. And the contribution motivated team member who needs to feel that their work matters to something beyond the number starts to feel like a cog rather than a person. And so how do we lead across this difference? Well, know what motivates each person on your team and speak to that specifically. I reference the book, The 5 Love Languages. And even though I read that as a relationship book, I find that a lot of the ways that that book teaches the differences lands really well, because we can't assume that public recognition works for everybody. And so I found that book also can translate a lot into the workspace as well, because we just can't assume that everyone's going to be motivated by the same award. So ask, listen, and tailor that approach. Difference number 4 is the processing difference. Some people think out loud. They process by talking, brainstorming, exploring options in real time. Others process internally. They need time alone with the problem before they're ready to discuss it. And then putting them on the spot in a group setting produces their least good thinking. The think out loud leader often assumes that the quiet team member is disengaged or unprepared. The internal processor often feels overwhelmed or undervalued in a culture that rewards whoever speaks first. So how to lead across this difference? Send agendas before meetings, ask for written input before group discussions, create space for both real-time contributions and reflective ones, and never mistake silence for absence. So how do we lead across the gap? All right, well, how do we hold all this together? And how do you lead a team that includes fast movers and deliberate ones, direct communicators and contextual ones, achievement motivated and contribution motivated people, thinkers out loud and internal processors, all toward the same dream? 3 things, each one is simple. None of them are easy, but they do work. Number 1 is to make the dream the common language. Different people may never fully understand each other's working styles, but they can all understand the dream, the vision, the reason any of this work matters. And so when the dream is clear enough and present enough in how you lead, it becomes the thing the whole team organizes around, regardless of how differently they are wired. The fast mover and the deliberate thinker may always experience some friction with each other. But if they both clearly understand that the dream needs both their contributions, that the momentum matters and that the thoroughness matters, and neither one of them is alone is enough, then the friction becomes productive tension rather than interpersonal conflict. And then leading from the dream constantly, right? Make it the filter for every conversation about how the team works together. And when difference creates friction, we come back to the vision. Ask, what does the dream need from both of you right now? And that question redirects the energy from difference to direction. The second thing, number 2, is get curious before you get frustrated. I've said this for years coaching leaders, and said this to myself as a leader, is that the moment you notice yourself reading a team member's behavior as difficult, just pause. Get curious before you get frustrated. Ask, what is this person's working style telling me about what they need? What am I bringing to this dynamic that is contributing to the friction? And what would change if I adjusted my approach to meet them rather than waiting for them to meet me? Curiosity is a leadership superpower, and it is especially powerful with people who are nothing like you. Because once you understand how someone is wired, their behavior stops reading as a problem and starts reading as information. And information is always more useful than frustration. And number 3 is lead individuals, not archetypes. The 4 differences I described are frameworks, not boxes. Real people are more complex than any category. The most powerful thing you can do as a leader is know your specific people, not just their type. What does this particular person need to do their best work? What is their version of recognition? What kind of feedback lands for them? What does accountability look like in a way that actually motivates rather than deflates? Those questions are answered by knowing the person, not by knowing their category. That kind of knowledge is built through genuine attention, through one-on-one that are actually about the person, not just the work. Through the kind of leadership presence that makes every individual on your team feel seen as an individual, not managed as a resource. The dream is built by people, and people build their best work when they feel genuinely led, not just managed. And that is true regardless of how different they are from you, maybe especially because of it. So I want to close with the frame I opened with, because I think it is the most important thing in this episode. The people on your team who are nothing like you are not obstacles to the dream. They are requirements of it. The dream you are building is bigger than your perspective alone. It needs thinkers you are not, strengths that you do not have, and ways of seeing the work that your natural lens would never produce. And the leader who can hold that diversity in alignment, who can lead across the differences without requiring everyone to become a version of themselves, the leader that builds something that actually scales, something that actually lasts, and something that is genuinely bigger than any one person. That is the kind of team the dream deserves, and you are capable of building it. So this episode was useful. Share it, send it to a leader you know who is navigating a team that is beautifully, frustratingly diverse. And if you've not left a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, 3 minutes, real impact would be very much appreciated. And I appreciate that more than you know. Continue to dream bigger so you can lead better. And I'll see you next time on your Dream Coach podcast.